Welcome to the Wicked Podcast, where we read the business books you don't have the time for. I'm Marcus Kirsch.
And I'm Troy Norcross.
And we are your co-hosts for the Wicked Podcast.
We take from the thousands of business books out there and test the author's ideas by comparing them to real-world challenges. With over 40 years of projects between us, we've got quite a bit to compare against. We give you the condensed takeaways, followed by our review with the authors.
We know you want actions, not theories, and it's actions that we want to help shape, because that's what the Wicked Podcast is all about, helping you to become a wicked company.
Marcus, we made it. We made it into the new year. It's 2021.
Everything will be different, apart from the fact that we are, I think, 5 minutes away from the next lockdown here in the UK. That's exciting yet again.
Yeah, okay, all right. Now that I started off on a positive and then you brought it down to a negative, let's talk about the book. That'll go up again, right?
Yeah, please. Well, yeah. So today we have Ton Dobbe here, who wrote the book The Remarkable Effect. And it's a great book around, your ideas and what you have as a business and what you're actually doing, and better finding who your customers really are and be authentic and detailed about it. Before I ramble on, what were your insights?
No. Before you ramble on, come on. Tell us why.
Keep rambling on. My questions are all way too lengthy.
No. Tell us why you really liked the book. Tell us the real reason why we read this book.
Don't know what you're talking about.
Deep down, you're a surfer dude. I know you're a skater boy.
Yeah, there's a wave on the cover. Yeah, well, when I talked to Tom and also when I read it, obviously he's into big wave surfing. I love big wave surfing. Never done it, probably will never do it because I'm too old for this now. I might easily die trying, so I won't do that. But yeah, he's got some great stories in there where he talks about that and he compares. And I think there's some great analogies there about, risk taking, trying, learning, and being very precise about what you do, because the big wave surfing community is a very specific community, different from all the other surfers. And I think it's a nice analogy. And just for that, it's probably worth reading and reminding yourself of why you're in the business as you are.
Yeah, and he does a good job. It's not kind of a dry educational book. He tells it in the form of a story around big wave surfing, which of course is interesting to me because it's in Portugal, and that's where I'm going.
Good for you.
All right, fine. So I'll get to my insights. I've got two particular insights. What would I tell my clients, after reading this book? I mean, the first one is not everyone is a risk taker. Not every job requires risk taking. Then it was really interesting that he said, look, if you're just a publicly traded company and your focus is on quarterly results, then that's the way you're going to be. If you're an entrepreneur and you're just wanting to kind of be a lifestyle kind of job, you may not be doing that. But if you're a tech entrepreneur on a mission, then you're going to want to take some risks and be real and with yourself and talk to your customers. And I think that's the other thing is when you're talking to customers and you ask, one of your classic 3 questions and 1 kind of questions about getting to why, what's the underlying reason and why don't people do that? And they kind of float around the surface. If you're going to talk to your customers and get all the way down to the why. Don't ask them what color they want the button. Ask them why they want to do this. How will it make their job better? What will their life be like if this actually works? And that's my 2 takeaways. But what about yours?
Yeah, so I'll probably have a 1.5, and the half is essentially that it's a really nice spread of getting. There's one point he made that is maybe a smaller thing, but maybe it's a big thing. I don't know. I'll let the listeners decide. Which is about automation. Automation is needed, and we're all looking for that. But think one step ahead, because you're not just automating to have less people in your team and save that money. Actually, what you want to do is you want to enable the people you already have to be able to do the things they actually should be doing. So don't think of automation as saving money. Think of automation as being able to make up time for the stuff you should really be doing, which is digging down more into the problem you're actually solving for your customers. The other part is also that the second one is to, more often or realize, and I know a lot of organizations eventually here and there change leadership, do you really know what the essence of your business actually is? And you need to check back in on that occasionally. And I think definitely over the last 10 years, a lot of organizations did not do that. And despite all the change, they did not go and say, hey, are we still in the business of giving people mortgages like Nationwide? They're not. I think they have something more essential and bigger there, which is about helping people save money in order to eventually afford a house, which is different to a mortgage. It's a much bigger picture. It's a more wicked problem, but it's the bigger value. It's what makes people happier. That's a real life goal right there. And I literally just talked to a CIO today about this. And he said, I need people to step out about fixing small stuff and building features into having an idea of the bigger picture, what they're actually doing with and for the customer. At everyday basis, they don't have it. So if we have a new process that helps them step back and get closer to the problem they're solving and the happiness and value they're creating for the customer, the better a job we're doing. Because otherwise, we're not delivering the right stuff. We're making everyone unhappy. So that for me was the bigger one of the two takeaways.
Great. Well, I want to finish on something that we didn't do in the last episode, and it's the time for us to do it right now. I'm going to talk about what we did in 2020. We did 31 episodes in 2020. We read 32 books. We just did our 30-second kind of recording just with this one about to come up. We also started off audio only, and we went to audio and video. We actually have made such a great impression in diversity by adding a lot of women authors into our list of books that we've been reading, which I think is a great thing for us to do. And we've reaped great benefits from that. And we've had really amazing traction on LinkedIn from social media and engaging and grown our audience. So, it's really important that companies take time to look back. What did they achieve in the last year? And the Wicked Podcast did a really great job. So well done to you for kicking my ass and getting me to come on this journey with you. Thank you.
And thank you, Troy, and we're just patting ourselves on the back, aren't we? But yeah, it's good to do that occasionally, to step back and look, because I know that COVID felt quite lonelier, and I felt underachieving, because I was like, what am I doing? And it was good when we met for the essentially Christmas drinks, and you're like, look what we've done. We've done hours of stuff. We talked to a really diverse bunch of people about problem solving and what to do, and figuring out, why people read books and not read books, and what they get out of it and why they're not getting things out of it, and what the major themes are. And I think we got an amazing broad spectrum of that, which is now our backlog, and it's brilliant. Or back catalog, so to speak. Yeah, we should be happy, and we will now in the second year.
That's right.
There we go.
Off we go. So shall we go to the interview?
Yes, please. Hello, everyone. Today we have Ton Dobbe here with us. Hello, Ton, and thank you for joining us.
It's a pleasure. I've been looking forward to this call.
Yeah. So this might be a very fun conversation, not just because it's a great book, but I think also because we might end up talking a little bit about big wave surfing here. So we'll see how this goes. But we start at the top as usual. The question to for our listeners in particular is, please tell us a little bit who you are and why you wrote this book.
Long story, but I'll keep it short. So my name is Ton Dobbe, as you highlighted. I'm Dutch, son of a farmer, a tulip farmer. But for some reason, I ended up in the IT sector. I've always been in business software. I've worked my whole life for a company in the Netherlands called Unit 4. As that progressed internationally, being in jobs in product marketing, product management, in the last 1.5 years or so in the role of a chief evangelist. So for me, it's always been about what's next, and I'm particularly fascinated by how do you stand out from the crowd, and how can you create a business that people really value and create momentum with that. So when I left Unit 4, that was my premise, to help business software companies around the world do that. And my message was, I'll help you reimagine what can be to become a remarkable software business. And in order to live up to that, I decided I had to do research and started the podcast myself. So that was beginning of 2018. And a long story short on that, that's where I started to see a number of patterns. of companies that started on a great idea, but for some reason struggled to create momentum or to break through that momentum that they have created. And I decided, okay, it fascinates me in the first place. Why not write a book about it? I was pushed a little bit by some of my podcast guests, but that's what I did in 2019. And I wanted to reveal a framework of what I've experienced in my own life, but also bring in all the experiences from the people that I've interviewed on my podcast. So these became a framework of the 10 traits that define all those software companies that we just keep talking about. That's how that came about.
Yeah, lovely.
It's really interesting. And you start off the book with kind of 3 basic questions. Is it valuable what you're doing? Is it urgent? And are you exceeding in how you deliver that particular experience? And I think they're really, really great questions. But I've worked with enough people, both kind of startup entrepreneurs as well as enterprise professionals, that live kind of, as we say, in the land of denial. They're just really not kind of grounded in reality. How do you deal with people when they kind of fail to grasp the reality of the answers? That kind of they're fooling themselves.
Yeah, great question. There's a reason, of course, why that triangle is there, because it's not only each question in itself. It's there. You have to answer all of them with a yes.
Yes.
And that provides you with a framework to stop you from doing the wrong things. Because if something is not valuable to your customer, they won't be interested. If it's valuable, but it's not urgent, they won't be interested either. Because it's like maybe someday. And if you are offering or solving a valuable problem that is urgent, but you do it in a way that is where you don't exceed expectations, you're just like all the others, and you end up in that game of how do you call it? The fight for discount, and nobody, of course, wants that. But I agree with you. A lot of companies, first of all, don't ask themselves those questions. They think they know it better. They are obsessed with technology, so they create a solution that's actually looking for a problem. And also what you've often see is that sometimes they get it right in the beginning, they get that momentum, then they reach their success and they think they're there. And then they become complacent. And that's a very dangerous place to be. And this can happen to actually early startups as well. But particularly you see it with companies that have been around for a longer time. It's when, for example, when the complacency kicks in for a number of reasons, but it's actually just that whole thing of that you start to tell yourself the story about that you're doing great, and somehow that then starts to lead all of what you're doing and the decisions you make. Sometimes it also has to do with the fact that there's ownership changes. For example, I saw a big change when, for example, the company I used to work for went did its IPO in '98, where it was all about long-term focus in the beginning, and then the IPO came and everything became quarterly driven, and then you start to take shortcuts. So there's so many factors. And your question was, like, they're living in denial. How can you understand and give them a framework that they stay grounded? I think it's very hard to do on your own. So my advice would always be, surround yourself with people that tell you what you need to hear rather than what you want to hear.
Very good.
Typically look for those people outside of your company. For example, customers, there's nothing better than actually talking to customers that tell you the truth. But it can also be peers, that's also why I started my tribe at the beginning of last year when I launched the book, because I also realized that reading a book is just not going to cut it. Mm-hmm. Yes, you get a lot of ideas from it, but implementing it is a completely different thing. And then you get all the bias. So there's so many different things you could bring up to avoid complacency, but it's something that you really should plan for.
Yeah, good answer.
That's great. I think obviously the reason why we're running the podcast is not just my book, but also because we want to help people get a little bit more into books. And as you rightly said, there's a lot in books that often only just feels theoretical, or it feels a bit too far removed, and it's therefore really hard to implement. But in particular, I think and I'm talking from my own background in service design and design thinking here, is especially the customer centricity, which always strikes me as when you are saying, just go and ask your customer, just go onto the street, go into the shop, go wherever they are, and just talk a bit and ask them questions. In theory, that should keep every business alive and fresh if they just keep doing that. So why do you think it is then that even companies who say they're customer centric are often not doing it? Why do they not quite recognize that as a value? Because I've heard anything from, and I literally heard this from people saying, oh, if we're just doing what the customer wants, then we're not creating any business value, which is totally upside down, right?
Yeah.
And it's nearly hard to say anything at that moment because it's so far out and it's so upside down. And it seems that it's very easy for companies, not just because of quarterly results chasing, to get separated from the customer. So again, sort of, why is it that particular arm is one that seems to be, going down so easily? Even so, it's the easiest one. It's easier than ever to get in contact with your customers.
True.
Yes, more and more companies seemingly are struggling with it.
Yeah.
Why
There's
is
a
that?
difference between saying it and doing it. Just ask, for example, a team of product managers or a product manager that you just talked to. When was the last time they actually saw a customer and actually talked to them in depth, and not only talking but listening? That's likely months ago for the majority. The ones that are really doing it, that's of course a good sign. The other thing is that we too often walk away with specifications rather than what's really going on. We're asking the wrong questions. Of course, you ask a customer what they want. Yeah, they will come up with a number of things. Typically, what they are going to say is, okay, I'm using your product. I would like to have this button go there. And if you just then settle with that and you just place that button over there, well, what's going to happen? Nothing is going to happen. You need to keep asking questions. That's the whole thing around being curious and keep asking and digging. Like, why do you need it there? What's behind this? And really try to understand the problem. And that's also what I see as a big one, that too many people, whether in product management and product marketing, don't really understand what the real problem is. They think they understand, but they haven't gone deep enough. I recently went through a work stream with one of my customers, and it kept coming back that what the customers were struggling with was efficiency, a lack of efficiency. At the end, the lack of efficiency, it's maybe that they are struggling with that, but it's not really the problem. The problem is at the end, what is the consequence of not being efficient? That's what, at the end, where you will start to identify things that wake people up at night or what could get them fired. And if you start solving for the wrong thing, just making your product more efficient, you're thinking you're doing the right job, but you just end up doing the wrong things. And you're just doing what everybody else is doing, and at the end, you're creating a mediocre product.
So what do you then usually when you realize that that's what the client is doing or that's what the company is doing? What do you normally then recommend? Do you think it's a flaw that sits more with the teams on the ground or the leadership or both? Or do you tell CEOs, for example, to just go into their own shops and have a look? Or what's normally, because it all feels easy. I remember when I worked in advertising and creative teams had to come up with ideas around a campaign for a product. They would sit on the laptop often and Google things on YouTube that sort of went along that theme and whatnot, and try to directly solutionize essentially on looking at what kind of great ad can we produce, rather than actually going into the shop, having a look around, observing customers. And they could have done so literally. A lot of them are here in London inner city, so there's shops around all over the place. It takes 5 minutes. Yeah, I had to drag them out there by their hair. It's impressive. So what do you normally say to people? Especially, I can imagine you probably dealing with CEOs or something, like you said in your book when you talk to the guy who's on the train.
Yeah.
So how do you get people to implement
Well,
that?
first of all, really understanding what is the problem you're solving. Sometimes translated in a different way. What is the business you're really in? And that is 9 out of 10 something completely different than what you think it is. I mean, I used to work for Unit 4. I was responsible for the international product suite. I thought that we were in the business of ERP, and more specifically, ERP for services companies. Wasn't the case. We were not, well, we were creating a product that did something in that category, but we were not in the business of ERP. I mean, customers couldn't care less. We were in the business of solving a problem. And when we started to dig into that and really understand what problem we really solved or what aspiration we could solve faster than any competition, that's why we started to realize, wait a minute, we're actually enabling our customers to change faster than if they would go for any other product in this space. So we were selling a can-do attitude. We were selling confidence that whatever would happen, they would deal with it. That is something that's radically different from you're selling a system that does accounts payable and accounts receivable and maybe a little bit project accounting. So the route to that was the product. That's what we were doing. But why our customers were buying it wasn't because of that. They could buy 10 other systems. So it's getting back to like really understanding what problem you're solving, then understanding like who in the world is actually gets value from this, and who not. Very important as well, because then people go really broad. You have to understand also like who you're not for, and yeah, people also get that wrong very, very often. We thought we were for everybody that were delivering a service through people, so government, education, not-for-profit, professional services, just name all those industries. And it appeared to be that we were right for just a flavor, a slice of that. And the others, you know, they could work with the functionality, but were not a good fit because they didn't have the pain. So too often we get that wrong as well. And it's the art of actually getting to the real problem that you're solving and understanding really who gets the benefit from it. That's where you get very specific. And that's where, yeah, you can start to talk in a language that hit people, not only factually, but also here with the heart. And that's where people say, wait a minute, it feels like you really get me. You're in my head. I need to talk to you. That builds trust. And once you get that right on the marketing side, you'll have better conversations. Once you get it right on the product side, you'll have a product that resonates more and that actually people start talking about. But it goes back over to the foundation.
I always talk about the language of value. And I say the language of value has to be expressed as one or more of 5 things. How do you make money, save time, add joy, or remove pain? Because if you're not talking about what you're doing in one of those 5 things, one or more of those 5 things, then you're just talking about features. And features are not value.
True.
The other thing is I'm an old-time customer service guy, an old-time IT guy, and I used to work tech support. And at one time, a person had a problem, said, I can't print. And that was what they described as their problem. Yeah. And that actually wasn't their problem. You went down through it and okay, are you out of ink? Is the printer plugged in? Are you out of paper? Is the printer connected? Oh, it's not connected. Well, your problem is the printer isn't connected. So oftentimes what people present as a problem, I can't print, is a symptom. And you got to dig down and ask questions so you find out what's the actual underlying problem.
That's true. Yeah, that's true.
I really like that approach that you're talking about of identifying question why, and get to the real business that you're in, not the way you're solving the problem, because that's just features.
That's true.
You also talk about kind of selling the idea, getting the marketing language right and speaking to the heart. And I think that's a really good thing. But being an American, sometimes I can kind of really be overdoing on the marketing language side. And sometimes, especially in Britain, I get kind of a raised eyebrow from time to time that I'm overdoing it, because in British language it's much more kind of reserved and much more kind of quiet. But how do you balance selling the vision of being able to change your business, grow your customers against authenticity and pragmatism, because there's got to be a balance in there to get that right. And sometimes I miss the mark. So what's your secret?
Yeah, it's. I mean, I'm the last one to say that you should write or communicate marketing bullshit. So it's you should get far away from that. But what I mean with selling the idea and not the product is that you sell the outcome. Give people an idea about what life will look like once they are working with your product. And that is again about the pain is solved. The aspiration is being achieved. They start to look better for their peers, for their boss. And you can be very concrete on that. You can be highly credible on that. So selling the idea is not about being vague, by all means. It's by actually creating a picture in someone's head, like what can be. And how your product then, when they say, okay, that's what I want, then the next thing is, how do you get there? And that's where the functionality comes in. And you say, okay, in order to get to the situation, you have to solve these 3 things. And this is how we solve them. Be super concrete on that. Again, it goes really back to understanding who is your ideal customer and understanding the problem. What is valuable, what is high on their agenda, and how can you solve that in a way that you exceed expectations, which is also something very subjective. You have to understand like who you're competing with in their mind. And that can be something as simple as understanding how they currently solve it. That can even well be without any of your competitors doing something completely different.
I think, yeah, that's one of those things where I think when you look at marketing often, or when you talk to people who run in particularly a new company, they're still trying to figure out what they're actually doing. It's often where you can tell the difference between someone who actually has talked to a customer, understands the customer or not. Yeah. And I think then the way you propose yourself can be anything. It can be, as you said, look at what they're doing right now. Look at the current state. And then tell the story of what you do instead. That's better. Or you tell the story of that aspirational thing that this will make you do things like that. And you will feel like that. And I think when we talk about that, what quickly comes as well, and again, it gets into often this kind of area that some people like to talk about as fluffy. But we know it's quite impactful, but really hard to measure, which is, customer emotions first, logic second. For a long time, we've been thinking that customers are very logical, or people in general. I think a lot of societies and economic models are built around the fact that the myth of, we're all very logical and we're always after our best interest and that's all we do. So this flawed kind of Cold War principle. But actually, we found that, people make a lot of decisions based on emotions, and that's it, because we're emotional animals. Yeah. So when we say customer emotions first, logic second, why do most organizations struggle with recognizing that? Because they're made of people, and people know that they're emotional.
Yeah.
How do you get them to recognize it as a value?
Yeah. First of all, I think they understand. They have a different interpretation of what emotion means. Emotion doesn't mean that you make your customers cry.
Hopefully not.
Well, but that's where it starts, right? Some people think that we are in a business that's serious. In our business, there is no room for emotion. For example, we were selling finance systems, selling it to CFOs, number peoples, people that want to have control, that want to have governance. At the end, these people are people as well, and they're going through motions with their company that wake them up at night. So addressing that brings you closer. You understand me. You show the empathy. They have frustrations as well. I mean, at the end, I came to about 21 different emotions that people can have: fear, joy, hope, as well. I mean, you get 21 different styles. And that's what it's all about at the end. So you need to be concrete in terms of the facts. You need to back your statements up, but you also need to have a good understanding about what these guys are going through, what they want, what they care about, For example, if we were selling to a CFO in a company that was more in the early majority phase, they were much more interested in, being risk averse. And that's what the whole message was guiding towards too. And we were addressing that with the right emotional elements as well. Where other people, for example, they just had an investment from a venture capital, and they were up to start scaling faster and innovate faster, selling the same product, but with a completely different set of arguments, because these people were attracting a different type of CFO that was less risk averse, that understood that if they wanted to kind of achieve those incredibly heavy targets, they needed to take risk, and they were just living it like that. So with every company, is a certain level of a certain number of people that are being attracted, that care about different things and believe different things. That's what you need to address. And at the end, the numbers need to add up. So
you bring up the topic of risk, and we've interviewed a number of great authors and read a lot of great books, and aversion to risk is a real common theme.
Yeah.
And learning how to experiment by starting small and reframing what failure is, where it's not success, but it's learning and other opportunities.
Yeah.
And obviously you've got a good relationship with Seth Godin, or you at least kind of quoted a number of his works, which I think is great. And you really, again, promote, in surfing, it's the people who took the big risks who actually got the big rewards. And I think the question that I've got for you is, in surfing, it's mano a mano. It's one person. You're solo. And if it all goes horribly wrong, it's just you. But in risks in business, it can be your team. It can be your shareholders. It can be even your customers. And the level of impact of one wrong decision is much greater. How do you kind of reframe the taking of risks in such a way that people can say, yeah, it's absolutely worth doing, even though the impact is bigger than just me?
Yeah, I think the whole aspect of risk is, first of all, it's a mindset. And I mean, I speak to people, and that's the subline of my book, like it's the essential book for tech entrepreneurs on a mission. That's already saying something about how these people are wired. There are many people that are maybe tech entrepreneurs, but they're not so much on a mission, or at least not something that is bigger than themselves. They may be more towards, making sure that the company hits their 40% EBITDA growth this year. That's a completely different set of beliefs that they have and things they care about. So I'm not going to judge whether people should take risk or not, but I do see that in order to move forward and in order to stay relevant in a market, you need to take some level of risk. Because if you don't, you go for everything that's granted, that works, that has been proven before, you end up in a market that is like everybody else, mediocre products. And that is challenging in so many different ways. It lengthens the sales cycle because it's not clear enough what how you're helping a customer make a difference versus the rest. It ends up in winning less deals, more discounts. The question at the end is, what is the bigger risk? So it's just by saying, okay, we have to have a 3x pipeline because we know we are going to lose. We can lose so many different deals,
right.
Or we know we are going to have them. Yeah, that's of course a calculation, but the failure, of course, that's what you then work with. Where if you would take a little bit of a risk and try to be different from the pack, which of course is risk taking, could even well be that it's turning out far better for you. So yeah, for everybody, risk is a different word, and the meaning of it means something different. But typically with innovation and the companies that are out there that are transformative in one way or another, nobody has written that book yet. And it's about understanding, like, what is the real big problem, what is broken in a particular market, and how can we get there step by step. So it's not building that big thing and then say, okay, here is it, do you want to have it? No, of course, it's trial and error, and it's understanding where your North Star is and going on that journey. and yeah, you fall up a couple of times. But if you see that as learning, like you just said, that's fantastic.
Yeah, I think, and I'm already looking at the time, because as usual we have more questions than we have time. So I'm gonna start one that is, I think, as much quite topical as it is quite interesting, given that we now live in a COVID world, and a lot of organizations are trying to restructure and trying to be more lean and rethinking, how they use people, how they use tools, and so on. And there's one thing, I think I'm paraphrasing a little bit, where you say, how organizations can be held hostage by robots versus enabling people power, right? So people are pushed to use a tool in a particular way and can't bring themselves in, and losing a lot of potential. And a lot of people are trying to rather get rid of people than enable them. So what's your angle on that? Because it's such a typical way to seemingly save money, but we all know it's also limiting how you can grow and what you can risk and what you can learn.
Of course, I see that, and it's. I mean, I've been part of a world whereby automation was the thing. An ERP system, an enterprise resource planning system, is all about automation and doing things that are repetitive and can be done by machines in a better way. How shall I phrase this? Automate. You can only cut so much cost. At some point, you need to also kind of increase growth. And I also see differences between whether it's the product world, manufacturers and so on, and the service world. And since more and more companies are becoming services oriented, which is actually essentially delivered through people, that's what you have to bet on. I mean, that's where the value is coming from. And at the end, if you look at what's going on in the world, like in the countries like Japan, where the people are aging faster than the number of people that are aged and not in the workforce anymore is already far more than the people that are in the workforce, and the number of people that are getting into the workforce is smaller. So that group will only get smaller. So I think we are almost, it's like we have to kind of automate the heck out of things in order to free those people up, in order to deliver the creativity, the problem solving, and so on. And that's also where a lot of the value comes in from new technology. I think there's too many companies are too easily focused on automating things rather than going one step further and saying, hey, how can this technology actually augment that user and create something whereby 1 + 1 = 3? So automating is good, and we need to do more of it. But we also have to start thinking about what can we do extra to let people do things that they've never been able to do before. And that's where, that's where you start creating competitive advantage, or a position of advantage, to maybe put it better.
Well, Ton, we really appreciate the time that you spent with us. It was a great read. Marcus asked me an interesting question. We were talking about the book yesterday. And I said, a lot of this stuff actually is pretty straightforward and it's pretty obvious.
Yeah.
And yet there's not enough people doing it.
Exactly.
And the question is, why aren't they doing it? And I wanted to come back to what you said a minute ago. This is for tech entrepreneurs on a mission. And you've got to be in the right mindset to want to embrace the change that this book gives you a strategy to be able to do. So thank you so much for your time today. It's been really great speaking with you. Marcus, any closing words?
No, I did the question, you did the closing words. I think we're good.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thank
Tom.
you. It was a pleasure being here.
Thank you.
You've been listening to The Wicked Podcast with co-host Marcus Kirsch and me, Troy Norcross.
Please subscribe on Podomatic, iTunes, or Spotify. You can find all relevant links in the show notes. Please tell us your thoughts in the comment section and let us know about any books for future episodes.
You can also get in touch with us directly on Twitter on @WickedandBeyond or @Troy_Norcross. Also, learn more about the Wicked Company book and the Wicked Company project at wickedcompany.com.